We are under such pressure to open feminism up to mean everything and therefore nothing. And it is the most co-opted political definition on the planet. Like every other political movement, social justice movement, we have a right to define what we are and why we are fighting what we are fighting. So feminism is a quest for all women to be liberated from male supremacy. And it's also an acknowledgement that women are a sex class, oppressed by men as a sex class and not as individuals. The testimonies of women that recognise that they are not the only ones and that their abusers are not the only ones and that this is something to do with being a sex class. Feminism supports and promotes women-only spaces, activism and consciousness raising as methods to achieve the goal of women's liberation. The only way to be a feminist is to centre women and girls in a liberation struggle to counter patriarchy. If we don't have that definition, we don't have the basis for our campaigning and demands. If feminism is how any individual defines it, then we have already lost the battle. We don't just have a right to define feminism, we have a duty, we have an imperative to do so. And we can end prostitution and pornography. We can end male violence. There's nothing natural or innate about this. It's a global movement, it's a growing movement, and it's intergenerational. I will not have it that there is an ideological war between young women and older women. So feminism is for all women, despite the attempts to divide us. Only as a collective movement can we resist and overcome male violence and abuse.
The free speech of women is under threat. Women have lost their jobs, they've lost contracts, they've been assaulted, they've received rape and death threats. Every effort is being made to frighten us into silence and compliance. And when that doesn't work, they try to take away the spaces we have.
This is our punishment for doing feminism, for doing actual feminism. What we're being told is that we cannot have solidarity between women. It is, in fact, a ploy to fracture any solidarity and any sense of sisterhood that means that we will be a movement which looks at men collectively. We're told we're on the wrong side of history and we should be silent as our rights are eroded. So what they mean when they say nice is they mean capitulate. So niceness and kindness, which I would hope we all aspire to, means capitulation. We're told that anyone that challenges this new orthodoxy is, of course, a TERF and a fascist. The political consequences for women in losing our single-sex spaces are severe, but none of us are transphobic, except for some of those women that aren't in the women's movement, that aren't feminists, that aren't on the left, and that think it's perfectly fine to laugh about trannies or make disparaging comments about appearances, which has no place in feminism.
How can we reach out to girls and women who don't see themselves as women while still being sensible about their reasons for wanting to run away from homophobia and objectification and stereotypes and female position in the world?
Unfortunately, the door is open now for what looks like a handy route out of womanhood. And this is how we need to explain it. Women who are so abused by patriarchy, by men, that look for a means to escape and to point the finger at them. It's appalling. So we have to keep the door open. 2 months before she died, I spoke to Andrea Dworkin. She told me, if I give up now, younger generations of women will be told that porn is good for them and they will believe it. And now look, men have always told women to chill out about issues such as pornography and sexual violence. But what's new and particularly shocking is that now many women who label themselves feminist are saying the same thing. So young women in universities and other settings are being silenced and bullied into accepting a form of feminism that benefits men and that's harmful to women, not knowing their history, not understanding that their rights were not handed to them on a plate. Now, the attempts to discredit and redefine feminism has always been motivated by the desire to prop up the status quo. So the resurgence of feminist activism, in particular in relation to campaigns against male violence, is in response to the unbridled misogyny on both the left and the right. The hostility and bullying that I faced as a young feminist came from deeply sexist men, unreconstructed sexists. But the hostility and bullying that younger feminists have to deal with now comes primarily from the so-called progressives of their generation. Woman hating has been dressed up as progressive politics. So what we have to do is not take this shit from men on the left. And we have to recognise that this is our left. We are the left. What you're doing is you are bastardising and misunderstanding at best what Marx said. Because if you understood what Marx said, you wouldn't be going with any of this gender ideology bullshit. I love young feminists speaking out and standing up and being brave and fearless, really. We're living under the worst misogynistic backlash I've seen in the 40 years I've been involved in feminism. And what this has done is it's had terrible consequences for so many women, but it's also brought hundreds and thousands of us into activism. Younger feminists who resist this bullshit and who dare to do what you're doing it for all of the women that can't do it. But there is something in young women that is building like a fire in the belly, and we have to imagine a world that we've not yet lived in.
Courage calls to courage everywhere, and its voice cannot be denied. That's why you're all here tonight, and that's the reasoning behind this lecture series in a nutshell. Our opponents can smear us and take opportunities for us to speak away, but as long as there are people with enough courage to seek out ideas, we'll always find ways to listen to each other and to be heard.
It's what feminism is built upon.